Um, Basically what I want to show you is how you can explore history from your own desktop through maps without ever needing to go near a museum or an archaeological dig or whatever, and try and do some time travel back through time with maps. Try and take the name and the location you might have for an ancestor 150 years ago and bring up a picture of that spot today. So everything I do is available on my website. The address is there, pwaldron.info/hunt with a capital H. That's the only note you really need to take. If you have an internet connection, you can go home and look at all this stuff yourself. We're very lucky in Ireland and having an excellent collection of maps of the whole country dating back to the establishment of the Ordnance Survey Office in 1824. It took 22 years to complete the mapping of the whole country. The people who went around the country did a lot more than draw the maps. They included the likes of Eugene O'Curry and John O'Donovan, who wrote the Ordnance Survey letters, sending back to head office information on folklore, archaeology, all sorts of other things, and on surnames. That part of the work is very valuable for genealogy as well. Won't be talking about any of that today. I'll be concentrating on the maps and how you can use them, because they're now all online, practically all online. The interesting thing is they started out as large sheets of paper with a white margin around the edge in which were printed the dates of surveying and the dates of engraving and printing. So you knew exactly at what point in time you were looking at the place. To put them online, they cut off the margins and the dates and stitched them all together with no gaps. So you kind of have to work out for yourself exactly what the date is. But we can tell roughly the first set of maps is around 1840, the second set of online maps is around 1900, and the third set of online maps is live today, updated every time a new house is built. I was just talking to Kathleen there, who's the chairman of the Friends, who's my neighbour, about the new houses being built in our estate, and I'm sure some of them are already on these maps or will be very shortly. You can go to the OSI website to read the whole history of the Ordnance Survey. Hopefully my internet connection is working. There's the page with the history. There's also a wonderful book by my former Trinity College colleague John Andrews telling the whole history of the organisation. But the really important link, another very short one, is just maps.osi.ie. Type that into the address bar on your web browser, and up comes a map of Ireland, eventually, with menus around it. And you can use the zoom bar over here on the left to zoom in and out. You can use three tools here. The pan tool allows you to move the map around, and you can see a little red plus sign there in the middle, just off the Wexford or Wicklow coast. So a very useful thing to do is to drag the map until that red plus sign is right at the point you're interested in, and then you can go up here to your address bar, which I've managed to hide. There it is. And you can select that address, and when you put that in your bookmarks or copy and paste it, you can go back to that address. It'll bring you back to exactly the same point on the map when you want to go back again. So I'm part of what John Grenham, the former Irish Times columnist and one of Ireland's best genealogists, has called the worldwide fraternity of historic map nuts. There's one or two more members of that, I think, here in the audience. I'm really only going to talk about maps going back to the start of the Ordnance Survey, nothing before the 1820s, or really not much before the 1850s. If you want to know anything about older maps, John Elliott is here in the audience, and he's your expert once you go back to medieval times. Then we have a second set of maps. We have Google Maps. That link actually brings up a Google map. They're not nearly as detailed, and they're just contemporaneous maps. But they have a second feature. They have Street View. So when you bring up the map, you have a little yellow man down here at the corner. And if you want to go and see, you drag the yellow man and a blue network of roads appears. And suppose you want to see, I'll be coming back to this junction as an example later on. It jumps around if you're not careful. You pop the yellow man down, and there we are looking at a road in Moveen in West Clare, and I've landed somewhere in the middle of a field, but I can turn around and see if I can recognize where I am. Drive around, swivel around with the right and left arrow keys on your keyboard. You can turn around and get your perspective that way. We're at a crossroads somewhere, not sure exactly where I dropped that now. Or if I want to drive along, that may be just a farm road. It is, I don't think I can drive along it. But if I want to drive along this road, I click on the road and I use the up arrow key to drive forwards and the down arrow key on the keyboard to reverse until I find the place I want. And the third set of maps that I'm going to show you are the Griffiths valuation maps, which are on a third different website. It would be lovely if we could get Google and the Ordnance Survey and the Library Council or whoever's responsible for the Ask About Ireland website to get together and put all these features on a single website and a single set of maps. Unfortunately, Google is in it for commercial reasons and it wants lots of money to cooperate with anybody else. So we have to be a little bit clever, open the three maps together and move back and forth between them. So if you're tracing your ancestors, you will often have problems working out exactly which is your ancestor. The spelling of names has not been standardized until computers came in, and computers couldn't understand that the same person could be McNamara with an MC or McNamara with an MC or just M apostrophe as they used to write the Mac prefix in the old days, and he might be Pat with two T's or Pat with one T or Paddy or Patrick, or he might be Paddy Joe if he needed to be distinguished from another Paddy McNamara next door. So to be sure you have the right person, I always recommend that you find exactly where the person lived and work from the place to the person rather than from the person to the place. I came across an example in my mother's family in Mayo yesterday where I was looking at a family tree done by what I thought was a very good genealogist about 20 years ago, and he had Thomas O'Neill with his son Michael and Michael's wife Mary, and they lived in the townland of Shamerdew in County Mayo. And it all seemed fairly well documented. But I discovered that Michael O'Neill died in Shamerdew in 1895, and another Michael O'Neill from Shamerdew looked for an old age pension in 1921. It turned out there were two Thomas O'Neills. They both had sons Michael. They both married women called Mary within a year of each other. One of them disappeared. I actually thought initially, well, the first wife must have died, and it must be a mistake on the marriage certificate that it says bachelor rather than widower when he remarried 11 months after his first marriage. But it now turns out the first man emigrated to Batley in Yorkshire, the second man stayed at home. There's two completely parallel families. So don't assume because you find somebody with the name you're looking for, you found the right person. Names are very common. There are some older maps. I said I wouldn't say much about before 1840. Let me just give you a quick look at the Down Survey. Cromwell, when he conquered Ireland in the 1600s, needed to pay off his army, and he paid them in land, and he employed William Petty to survey the whole country. So it was not quite on the same scale as the Ordnance Survey about 170 years later, but it was pretty comprehensive, and the people at Trinity College have done a wonderful job of putting together the maps from the Down Survey, as it's called. They're not complete, there are a few little gaps, but we can look at some nice examples here. Again, we'll go back to my grandmother's home part of West Clare. I'm sure you're all familiar with Kilkee. Anybody here ever been to Kilkee? Everybody. There's the West Clare Peninsula going back to Loop Head as it was in the 1600s. You can see it much more clearly there. Actually, I'm going to turn off this light, which that doesn't help either. We can zoom in on this map until we can actually read the townland names. Somewhere we know. Takes a little while to focus. There it is now. There's Kilkee, Q-U-I-L-Q-U-I, which is the west end, the posh Protestant end of town. There's Duke, which is the poorer Catholic end of town where the fishermen lived long ago. They're all equally posh nowadays. They're all full of Limerick people. Not to be confused with another townland called Duke up in Ennistymon. Ballyonan is just called Ballyonan in the Ordnance Survey. It's known as Ballyonan or Donegal. I've never heard the locals say Ballyonan. They always say Donegal. And place name spellings change from time to time. The really good thing the Ordnance Survey did was it standardised one version of the place name spelling. It took until the 1950s for Irish spelling to be standardised. But you know, if you go to any official record, you're almost guaranteed that the spelling will be exactly as in the Ordnance Survey. I can't say that for things like the transcription of the census online, where the transcribers were not Irish and garbled a lot of the place names. But Moiferta was how Petty spelled it, Moiarta is how the Ordnance Survey spelled it, and Moiarta has stuck ever since. And I mentioned, here's another version where all three maps are overlaid. This is going to be Kilkee again. Scroll down on this screen. There you can see the bay. That's a modern map of Kilkee, but you can actually highlight the townland and click on it. And in theory, this is going to tell you who owned the townland before Cromwell and who owned it after Cromwell. And you will see townland name Clochan Malura, alias Duke O'Connor. Now, I never heard those names before. Owned in 1641 before Cromwell by Daniel O'Brien, a Catholic, and by Pierce Butler, 3rd Viscount Icarin, a Catholic after Cromwell. But it says it's in the barony of Kirkham and the parish of Kilmachnee. I think what they've done is they've taken the information for the townland of Duke and Ennistimon and bunged it down on the townland of Duke and Kilkee. You can have many townlands even in the same county with the same name. So it's important to specify in that case which parish you're referring to. But over here, Kilkee, now spelled Kilqui, and you have the proper owners, proper Barney Moiarta, Parish Kilfeara, owned by Daniel O'Brien before and after. I think that's the same Daniel who managed to avoid confiscation by Cromwell. So suppose you have an ancestor and you have a rough idea where he lived and you want to see exactly the spot. What do? First thing you need is the townland. Our government spent something like 38 million on introducing a postcode system last year. I say we already had one. It was called the townland system. It works much better. Everybody knows what townland they lived in. I'm sure most of you haven't a clue what your postcode is. To find the townland, you can look for the name in Griffith's valuation, which is freely available online on askaboutireland.ie. So somebody there asked me about a Fitzgibbon. So hopefully I can type Fitzgibbon in County Cork, was it? And we look for the parish of Ardskey and we search, and it gives us back a list of possibilities, and there's Bridget and John, and there's the townland. It's not actually giving us what townland they're in there, is it? Ardskey is the parish, but we have to click on the details to see the townland, I guess. Edward Murrock was the landlord, and it's the townland of Garan, so that's one of Garan. That's one of your guys, and we can see the original page, and I hate the way this is done, so I open it in a new tab, and it will show us what the original printed Griffith's valuation list looked like, with a horrible interface for zooming in and out. And there we have only about 5 occupiers in Ardskey. We have to scroll down to find the zoom control so that I can read it. There's all that blank space on the right and left, which they could use and don't use. Sorry, Garon we're looking for. And here, and there she is, Bridget Fitzgibbon and John Fitzgibbon subletting from her. So don't know whether it was a father-in-law subletting from a daughter-in-law or a son subletting from a mother or whatever, but we would guess they're probably closely related. Do you know? But we're not sure exactly how. And then we can see when I touch it, it zooms out again. We can go back, and the really nice thing is we get the map view. Again, it takes a minute to load up. A chance to lubricate my vocal cords. Griffith's valuation was done between 1848 and 1864. It took nearly as long as the Ordnance Survey to cover the whole country. John Grenham recently had a lovely little trick. If you want to know exactly what date it's done, you go to the address bar up here and you see a 6-digit number, 299017. And you want to turn back to page 1 of section 299. The first 3 digits are a volume number, the last 3 digits are a page number. So if you go back to page 1 from page 17, you get the title page, and down there at the bottom I see a date. I have to zoom in so that you can read it. The first day of May 1851. So for the townland of Groan in Archcay Parish down near Charleville, it was done in 1851. Most of County Clare was done in 1855, Mayo 1856. But even within a county, it wasn't necessarily all done within the same year. But you can always turn back to page 1 and look up the date to see exactly when it was done.
Paddy, the townland picture down up there a minute ago, that was the date of the property. When the detail were collected.
The map.
The map, yeah.
I don't trust these maps. This is called a Griffith's valuation map, and I guess it's when I looked at the West Clare ones and I saw the West Clare Railway, which I knew wasn't even a pipe dream in 1864, that I was sure these maps were not Griffith's valuation maps. They are much later than Griffith.
The page brought up to show what townland.
Oh, the page with the details?
Yeah. That has a date at the bottom.
Oh, the
details, yeah.
that one it did, yeah.
Yeah.
If it'll ever load up again. Somewhere down there. 1851 is there as well. So it's all over the place. And it's all over the place in the sense it took 16 years to cover the whole country.
Oh, the dates change rapidly, you know, page to page.
Yeah.
So the date is accurate, say, on those sheets.
It's as accurate as the amount of time it took to gather the information in West Cork or wherever, get it up to Dublin, get it to the printers, get it printed. And I suspect there were some delays. They only went around checking occupiers about once a year, so plus or minus a year. Certainly if you're looking for an ancestor who trying to work out the date of death and you get the date when the occupancy changed or the person paying the rates changed, that's within a year or two usually of when the person died. The person might die in 1881, but it might be 1883 before the change of ownership is reflected in the records in Dublin. So where am I now? Am I back at my map? I am. And there's a scroll button down there, or a zoom button I should say, and you can zoom in, and the thick red lines are townland boundaries and the thinner lines are farm boundaries. And the problem with this particular area is there don't seem to be any plot numbers on this particular map, are there? The focus on the projector isn't great. Hopefully some of the others will work a little better. That wasn't supposed to happen. Move around a little bit, I get a better view of the screen and you can still maybe hear me. I'll talk about some of the ones that I have links to. Sorry, we should have given the warning, turn your mobile phone off. The last talk I chaired, the speaker's phone went off in the middle of it, so don't feel too embarrassed. If you don't know the townland, you can find it from the online census returns. How many of you have never looked at the census online? Handful of people. Practically everybody in Ireland at this stage has tried to find their ancestors in the online census. I was amused the other day, I was reading a PhD thesis from 2011. Again, the transcriptions are not to be trusted. Look at the originals. Let's see if I can find the one that was quoted in the PhD thesis. It was somebody referring to Dean White of Neenah, well-known historian, who was prominent in the news 150 years ago this week because he was rumoured to be harbouring the Fenian rebels in West Clare, where he was in the parish of Carrigaholt at the time. And in 1901, he was in Neenah, probably as Patrick White. So hopefully we'll find him. Wakes up. Connecting, here we are. Typical with the internet, when you want something in a hurry, it goes spins and spins. Here he is. Summerhill, age 65, Patrick White. And we get a transcription. And we have to take the show all information box to see. And it says he is the Dean of Killaton, Vicar General of Killaton, Parish Priest of Neenah. Anybody know where Killaton is? Somewhere that has a Dean and a Vicar General. Killaloe. So this was contracted out to non-English speakers who were not familiar with Irish place names and Irish surnames, and they garbled a lot of the results. So Killaloe became Killaton. And what astonished me was that this person, who I'd better not name, copied and pasted that description from that transcription into a footnote in a PhD thesis, and the supervisor, who's a renowned stickler for accuracy, didn't pick it up, and it appears in the thesis as Killaton instead of Killaloe. And the handwritten version should open in a second. It says 2 seconds up there at the top right, but it's going to be a long 2 seconds. This is the famous man who wrote a history of Clare and the Dalcashian clans, I think, in later life, and parish histories in other parishes he was based in. And there we have the handwritten version. And if we blow it right up and move over, we'll see how bad the priest's handwriting was. Dean of Killaloe, Vicar General of Killaloe, Parish Priest of Neenah. Not the best handwriting, but if you knew where you were talking about, you could have read it properly. Anyway, to show you where we are today, anybody know what townland we're in? Prior's Land. And it's interesting to see how they work this out on the Ordnance Survey map. This is one of the few buildings in which I have given talks which actually existed at the time the first edition Ordnance Survey maps were engraved. Usually I can go back and wow people by showing them that there was something completely different here. Our meteor connection is a lot slower than I would like. Prior's Land is all that's written on the map, and Prior's Land is what's in the Griffiths valuation. Prior's Land.
There's no Prior's Land, which is secondary land in 64 so there's no Prior's Land, no Prior's Land, that's Prior's Land.
This is Prior's Land, the part of Prior's Land that is not north, but not necessarily officially called south. Yeah, you will often find there are local variations like that in place names that are different from what the Ordnance Survey has. This is not looking good. Sorry, say that again. With the census, you have only 1901 and 1911. The censuses from 1821 to 1851 were in the Public Record Office during the Civil War. The vast majority were in the strong room behind fireproof doors. Some small fragments had been taken out by readers to consult in the reading room on the other side of the fireproof doors. The fire broke out in the strong room. All that's left is what happened to be out being consulted by readers the day the Republicans took over. The censuses for 1861, 71, 81 and 91 had already been destroyed. The story is that The household returns were kept in Ireland. They were transcribed into enumerators' books when they were compiling the statistical summaries, and when everything was printed, the enumerators' books were destroyed in Ireland. In England, they had the same system, but when everything was printed, they destroyed the household returns and they kept the enumerators' books. So some guy in the civil service in Dublin wrote to some guy in the civil service in London saying, we could pulp all this paper because of the paper shortage, because we can't get paper due to war conditions. Do we need to keep our household returns? And the guy in London wrote back and said, well, we destroyed ours. So not realizing that they each had one copy and the other copy had been destroyed. The second copy was destroyed in Ireland, which is really tragic. What we could do if we had another 80 years of census returns doesn't bear thinking about. Anyway, there we have our map of the Hunt Museum and the little red plus in the middle in South Prarsland. And oh, I keep forgetting to do this. I've destroyed it now. As a search return, you're automatically using the pan tool. If you follow a link, you have to click that pan button. So where the hell is the townland name? We're in Patrick Street Ward. And it's going to take forever to load up. It loads up one tile at a time. And eventually it will get done. I think I'm going to give up on the ordnance survey. I hope it's the OSI that's gone slow. Talk you through some of the other things and maybe come back to some of these maps later. We'll try the Google map. If it's my internet that's slow, you're in trouble. If it's OSI that's slow, we're fine. And it was working perfectly beforehand. Now nothing is working. Anybody else got a second Wi-Fi code that we can use? Is there a Hunt Wi-Fi that might work better? Switch over. Networks available. Not museum, not locked. Connect. Okay, we're connected to a public Hunt Wi-Fi and I'm fully exposed. We'll have to take those risks. Let's just see, does that work any better? Something's happening. Okay, okay. Hopefully we'll be all right with the free Wi-Fi. There's the Google map of the Hunt Museum. And the nice thing about Google Maps, which the Ordnance Survey doesn't have, I didn't think anyone here would know where I lived, and I was wondering, should I reveal it? And then I come in and find my neighbour is the chairman. I didn't know chairperson. So it will actually give you driving directions. So should I come over the bridge and down the Clare side, or should I come in the motorway on the Tipperary side? And it will, the times actually change. When I did this yesterday, one route was 27 minutes, the other was 30 minutes. Now one is 30, one is 31. But I don't think it actually knows quite how long the lights stay red on the bridge in Killaloo. So I've been in the motorway side rather than sit for 5 minutes waiting for traffic lights to change. And you can send anybody that link. I should have shown you how to do it on the Google map. There's a menu on the left-hand side. You can share or embed the map. Any map, a street view, directions, or just the ordinary map to a place. You can shorten up the address, and you can just click on that and copy it, and you can paste it in anywhere else. So if you're inviting somebody to visit, you can say, here's the directions for how to get there. They click on the map and they can zoom in and out or explore the different routes or see which road the traffic is less serious on, and so on. So we We can now go back through South Priorsland. I thought this was interesting. Eventually, the red line is the townland boundary, the green line is the parish boundary, the yellow line is the barony boundary, and eventually down here, there's a bit of space where that's not yet built on, where you can actually read Priorsland, and the acreage, 226 acres, 1 rood and 19 perches. And another interesting thing, Henry Street. So that's not where Henry Street is. So we can go from the 6-inch map from around 1840 to the 25-inch to a mile map from around 1900, just by clicking that button down at the bottom, which I didn't click properly the first time. And suddenly Henry Street South becomes Carey's Road. So Carey's Road was extended. The other thing that I found in that area some time ago is we have Boherbue running at right angles along there. What was that called? Well, it's still called Boherbue, but this part up here is called Nelson Street, now known as Parnell Street. So when I researched my Parker and Miles ancestors, I found them living on Boherbue, living on Nelson Street, and living on Parnell Street. And at the time I was still living in Dublin and I wasn't very familiar with the geography, but I kind of knew that Parnell was late 19th century and Nelson was early 19th century. And sure enough, they never moved, but the street name changed 3 times. And if we click on the current street map and keep our eye on Nelson Street, where the tile didn't load properly, sure enough it turns into Parnell Street. So you can actually travel back and forth in time and watch the street names change. And street names change a lot more often than townland names change. And of course, the reason that the townland name was printed way down at the southern extremity is the same reason that the railway station went down there, because they needed a lot of space in which to fit a name on the map and a lot of space in which to build a railway station. And there was only one space in the centre of Limerick, and sure enough, that empty space where the name was printed is now a network of railway lines when we go forward about 60 years. So you can travel back and forth and see what was in a place 100 years ago and 200 years ago on the same set of maps. And there's a copy of the Griffiths map for where we are today in the Hunt Museum. And we're not number 1 Rutland Street, we're number 14 Rutland Street. And F.W. Trevor Esquire was the collector. He was leasing from the reps of Robert Waller, John Vincent and Richard Vincent, a custom house, inland revenue and a post office. And if we scroll over, you see the valuation, the rate of the annual valuation was £92. The top of up. I don't have any more recent lists of occupiers. I have a few for Catherine Street coming up in a minute. The pop-up museum is number 4, is that right? Well, you will go to these records have been kept up to date right down to at least the 1970s in the valuation office in the Irish Life Centre in Dublin. You can see handwritten updates of these Griffith valuation lists, and you will see sometimes the numbers change, sometimes the building is improved and the valuation increases, and you'll see the changes of occupiers and the changes of lessors. So let's look at some examples of that. As I said, I've done a lot of research on the families of Parker and Miles in Limerick City. Sir Thomas Miles, you may have heard of, was the president of the College of Surgeons and was one of the Irish Volunteers gun runners at the time of the Howth and Kilcool gun runnings in 1914. So I wanted to see where he lived on Catherine Street. So I had a printed page on which there was no Miles on Catherine Street. But then I went into the valuation office and I found here was the Shannon Ward, updated in 1856 in blue and in 1857 in red. they use a colour scheme, different coloured inks. And the Mormon Church have done wonderful service to genealogists by microfilming a lot of old records in black and white. So they went in and they found these colour-coded results in the valuation office and said, oh, these are wonderful, we have to copy them. So they made black and white microfilms of them. So it's very hard to follow when it's black and white and you're looking to know what colour ink is it in. I also discovered if you use the same colour ink on two different types of paper and let it fade for 150 years, it can be very hard to distinguish as well. So here's where John Miles appeared as an occupier. And you'll actually see here there are two sets of numbers on the same record for the same houses. There we have the location on the map, and there we have the local number. So on the map he's in number 13, but the local number is number 15. And they run in opposite directions because number 12 is number 16. You can actually zoom right in there. And you see John Miles as the occupier. But then we have to try and find a map with the same numbers that coincides with that. And that was a little tricky. So I figured out John Miles moved in 1864. He was only there for about 7 years. Tracked down all the subsequent occupiers: John Robinson, William Earls, William Hinchy, William Humphreys, Margaret Troy. The local numbers column disappeared between 1878 and 1882. Between 1901 and 1910, everything was renumbered again, and what had been either number 13 or number 15 became number 21. So you have to go to the valuation office, go through these paper records, and note every occupier. You can bring a camera, you can bring a tripod, you can photocopy reams of stuff and study it at your leisure when you come home. So this is the map which they managed to find for me in the valuation office, which confirmed that the house I was looking for was this one here, which had been number 13 and number 15 and was renumbered to number 21. So it's one house down from the corner, and the corner house is number 19 Upper Cecil Street. And there's a more modern map with the street numbers as well, which I found. So I have circled number 21, that only has the modern numbers. And then you can go to your Google Street View and find the house, one house up from the corner. And there's the Backache Clinic. That's the house in which the famous Miles brothers were born. And you can also look at it on the Ordnance Survey present-day street map, which in some cases has house numbers on every single house when you zoom right in. In this case, I'm not sure that it does. Yes, you can just see number 21 there beside the red plus. And then you can use this to go back to the 25-inch map where there were no numbers. And again, the red plus is marking the same house. It's out in the back garden. And then you can go back to the 6-inch map, see what it was like in 1840. But because it's only a 6-inch to a mile, you have to zoom out one step to see it. They're just maybe 50 yards off, 20 yards off sometimes. The red plus is out in the middle of the street, but there's the house we're interested in just below it. So, yes, it's a lot of work, but you can get, a lot of you, I'm told, are retired people. You may have free travel. Get the train to Houston, hop on the Lewis down to Abbey Street, and pop into the valuation office. Access is completely free as of a year or two ago. Bring your cameras, bring your notebooks, and find out exactly who lived in your house or your ancestor's house from the time of Griffith's valuation down almost to the present day, and work out any problems you have with changes in house numbers and so on. And I have copied huge amounts of this stuff and put them up on my own website. So for example, there's Moore Street in Kilrush, where I've copied maps, copied the cancelled books, and if you want to look at House 1, there it is on page 358 in the revision book from 1855 to 56. From 1856 to 59, they're on page 46. And like that. And some of these didn't come out terribly well. This was before I got a tripod to do them, and some of them might need to be rotated, but you can download them and rotate them in your own image viewers. And there on my desktop I can trace the history of any house in Moore Street or Francis Street or Market Square, or the other streets I'm working on the history of.
So the archives that all this city evaluation scan from the
You don't have to go to Dublin for Limerick City, okay. And there were local copies kept as well as the Dublin copies of a lot of these records. The same as the birth, marriage and death records, the information was collected locally, kept locally, copied, and a copy sent up to Dublin. So you will find in other parts of the country, but as John says, they only go back to 1890 here.
yeah.
So if you want the older bridge, you still have to go to Dublin. Okay, we have about 15 minutes, so let me just look at one or two other nice examples. We'll try the Garonne thing again. Just I always like to do a new one. So there's a three-step approach. Open the OSI map and find the townland. So you can use this search to find a townland. Garonne, Charleville, Garonne, Artsgay. There'll be a hell of a lot of Garonnes. Let's just see if I say Garonne, Artsgay, does it find anything like it? Garonne Lodge, Knightsgrove, would that be the right Garonne? So we'll try that. And it's opening some tiles and not others. If this happens, sometimes zooming in or zooming out works to wake it up. Where do I want to go? North, south, east, or west of Knightsgrove? Well, we can always see whether the other time period loads up a little better. No, even our museum Wi-Fi is letting us down today. There's the street view. Ballyshanedy. There's Garonne on a road. So we'll guess the townland is somewhere around there. There it is. 1,211 acres. So that's one map, that's the Ordnance Survey map. Now I should have kept this one open at Ask About Ireland. Put it in again. Place name Garonne in the county of Cork. And in the parish of Artsgay, and search, and open the map view, and we'll open the original page as well, get the list of occupiers, and open that page that we had a minute ago. And we're looking for the Fitzgibbons in Garonne, and somewhere I'll find my zoom button. There it is, so that we can see what we're looking for. And we're looking for plot 5, and it's a farm of 86 acres. Edward Murrow, the landlord, has practically the whole townland, 984 acres. So let's see, can we find that by zooming in on this map? And we have 4 versions of the map here. And it helps to zoom in and out on this one maybe as well, get a sense of what's the shape of the townland if you're not familiar with it. It's on the parish boundary, and it's a long thing running from north to south with a narrow one beside it. So that's it, isn't it? we zoom in a little more and see, can we find an 85-acre plot 5? Is Knightsgrove the house? So number 5A, Bridget Fitzgibbon, a £5 house, so it's a substantial house. A £5 a year house will typically have a name on the map. So there's the house we're looking for, so we can zoom in a little more. And now we can, when we're sure of the house, go back to the OSI map. There's Knightsgrove up there. Put the little red plus on Knightsgrove. Go to the contemporary street map. Again, the day I wanted it's not loading properly. And we now open it in Google Maps. The third window, see, can we actually do it in Google Street View at the same time? So there's a load of other examples there that I'm going to skip through. Google Maps, and we're looking for Garonne Archgay. Garonne. Is it Garonne Ballyhay?
Yeah.
That should bring us to it. So it's near the Cork Limerick border. It's somewhere between the N20 and the border. Go back to the OSI map. Zoom out a little bit. See, can we find, there's Archgay Townland. Now we're working. There's Garonne. There's a railway line. We're not quite at the level where we can see. There's the main road. So it's not 100% easy for me to see exactly where it is on this map. We zoom back in again, and the name might eventually appear. Zoom so far in now we have no place names. But there's a road running east-west there. South of that road, is it? So we want to go down here somewhere. So hopefully I can figure this out on the Street View. Let's see what roads Street View has done. There's almost no main roads. This one? Or this one? You're not sure? But in principle, you may be able to line up the two maps. You drop your little man down and you get a view like that of exactly where your ancestor lived. That wasn't probably the best example to take. Let me take another one that I had prepared, and then I'll do one last one of real-time travel. Let's go back to Lishin Crony Bog, which I talked about earlier. This was where my grandmother was born, and they went to the local village down the Bog Road. If you're familiar with the road west from Kilkee, if you're going out to Carrigaholt or Loop Head, you come to a humpback bridge. We call it Beecher's Brook because if you don't slow down when you come to it, the passenger goes flying out the front window. Or Dinan's Bridge. This was Dinan's house. This is the Bog Road, which was the road leading down to Carrigaholt village if you didn't want to go by the main road. This is the 1840 map of the same area. So again, we're getting tiles not loading, and again, I'm forgetting to click the pan button. So there's the road heading west from Kilkee. There's the bridge over the Lishin River. So where's the Bog Road? It may be right along the townland boundary there, but we have this whole big area, but there's nothing in it but bog. No roads, no houses, no fields, nobody living there. If we come up to the top, there's one building there, one building there, one building there, and maybe a building over there. But if we go to the Griffith valuation, here's the Griffith valuation page. It's plot number 28 on the map. It's land, it's bog, it's owned directly by the landlord, who was briefly known at the time as William Armstrong. He inherited the MacDonald estate. These were the MacDonalds of Killoan. Newhall House out in Killoan, near Clarecastle, and he changed his surname by royal licence when he inherited from William Armstrong to William Armstrong MacDonald. So there are no occupiers in an area of 404 acres. And when we go to ask about Ireland and look at the map, this is the nice colourful map that comes up, which you think is wonderful until you realise it's not as old as it's made out to be. Zoom in, there's our big plot. The plot number changed in one of the revisions, so at this stage it's plot number 30, and you can actually see now that there are a few people living up around the edge of the bog. G, H, I, J and K, those letters denote houses that people had actually moved into at this stage. But if we go back to the older map, the resolution is less good, it's not in colour. There's a version with the letters for houses, but here's a version confirming no houses, 400 acres deemed to be uninhabited bogland. This is the bogland which was cut away to supply turf for the city of Limerick to warm this building by bringing turf up and down the estuary on turf boats. But I knew this place as somewhere which people I knew lived in all my life and thought their ancestors had lived there for hundreds of years. So I was astonished when I found it on the map, unoccupied but nobody listed. So my theory is maybe this was the bog that belonged to farmers who lost their main holdings in the famine, to the evictions which were widespread in the area. Maybe there were people there when Griffith came around, but they were just squatters and they weren't listed as official tenants. Then we can go back to the OSI version, which is this one, and we can actually go on to the 25-inch map from about 1900. And we can zoom in a little bit, and we can see this 400 acres of bogland, all divided up into individual fields with a number of houses clearly marked on them. So it became cutaway bog turned into farmland. I don't know whether to believe Griffith when he says it's unoccupied or not, but you can reconstruct the history of almost of famine evictions by looking carefully at some of these old maps. So a couple of minutes left, I'll just show you some real recent time travel you can do on Google Maps. Stumbled on this one the other day. Anybody ever gone for a drink in O'Mara's bar in Kilkee, on O'Curry Street? No? I thought it was very popular with the Limerick people. One or two people have. Okay, here's what Google Street View saw when it came around in March 2009. There's the late Michael Nolan's butcher shop. There's Dole's, originally a jeweller's shop. Another fascinating story. There's an enormous number of families from the Black Forest area of Germany came to Ireland in the late 1800s as clockmakers, watchmakers, jewellers. You had Cromers and Hartmans here on this street. And you had the Doles who originally came to Kilrush, and one branch of them moved to Kilkee. And the name stayed over the door. I don't ever remember the Doles being there. It was Ted Kavanagh's, it was Mag's hairdressing salon, and then the O'Mara's next door bought it. There's O'Mara's pub, painted yellow, and there's Maloney's drapery shop with the name over the door. So let's go into O'Mara's for a drink. See, will this work? Ooh, it's changed colour. There's the inside of the bar, and pop out again, see what's happened while we've been having our drink. Oh, they put out the summer furniture. We can sit and have a drink outside. No, sorry, I lost it there. I have to go back inside again. I clicked in the wrong spot. It's really fiddly. There we are inside. And I should try and go as far out as I can. And now turn around, and I lost it again. As you can see, the colour has changed, and the house next door, which was a single-storey house in 2009, is now in 2016 a two-storey house, and when I click out it goes back again to being the single-storeyed old house. So Google are creating this wonderful archive, which is not just maps, it's Street View. They're coming around every few years doing it. They're not actually telling us how we can travel back in time, but if you're lucky and you find a spot, you can click back and forth and jump 7 years back. It's a pity Google wasn't around in 1855 to provide that technology for the Griffith valuation people. But in years to come, if Google gets its act together, not only will you be able to go to Dublin and trace the list of occupiers, or go to your computer and trace back on maps from every 60 years, but you will actually be able to travel back in Street View and see how these houses have changed from year to year. So I guess I'm out of time. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you